Okay, part 3 of this episode of the GMS Magazine podcast, a podcast all about role-playing games, board games, and the people who make them, sometimes the people who play them. I am Paco Garcia, your co-host.
This is Chris from Deus Ex Machina. Funny thing,
Yeah.
we talked about our previous segment. I want to add one little thing as a side. This week, Microsoft Word or Microsoft 365 just got updated to include their inbuilt AI generator, Copilot.
Yes,
anyway,
it's something I've seen at work, and we may have to receive, actually, funnily enough, we may have to receive some proper formal training on how to use AI, because it's likely to become such a ubiquitous thing in my field that my company can't afford to have people who are not trained on how to use, how to spot fakes, and how to spot the mess that AI can do when we actually use it. So there you go. That's what happens when you work in cybersecurity. And now we have a review. I'm really looking forward to this because Greater Than Games is a company I've known for a very, very long time, since they got, the people of the multiverse, heroes of the something verse, like 10 years, 15 years ago. When did they get the card game out? The first card game came out in 2010.
I don't know, but my friend who has the system, he has a box, a colossal box that is just from the Sentinel Comics. And I think it was interesting that the Sentinel comic card game, which is gigantic, it's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cards. The Pathfinder Adventure card game doesn't come close to how many cards are in them.
Sure.
I didn't realize that there's no comic.
I thought they made some. They did publish a few of them, but Sentinels
way later.
Yeah,
so
when it
first came out, it was a game based on a comic that didn't exist, and I always remember being as old as I am, the early '90s. DreamPod 9, which was a role-playing game company, put out Jupiter something. Oh God, I'm blanking the name. And it employed Mechton's rules for Ortal Zorian. And they had still frames from an anime, and everyone was like, "Oh my God, this is this awesome mecha anime we want to watch." And the DreamPod 9 RPG is based off of it. None of that animation was real. Those are all fictitious cell frames that were made for this title. So it was a raw RPG for an anime that didn't exist.
Awesome. Okay, so anyway, you're going to review the latest game that they have released, which is it a re-edition of a superhero board game that they released again about 10 years ago?
Well, I don't really know the details on that. This was obviously a big Kickstarter one, CrowdOx pledged. It got delivered in 2024. This is Freedom 5, a Sentinel Comics board game made by Arcane Wonders, which is a different company than the company that made. So Arcane Wonders bought basically or licensed the Sentinels comic book franchise in order to make their board games. So that's what the first thing that's interesting is the fact that this game is published and designed by a completely different company than the company that owns the IP, which I thought was interesting. It would be like a completely different company making a Pandemic game, and having the Pandemic name and the Pandemic setting, but being completely designed by another company and another publisher. But anyway, this is Freedom 5, Sentinel Comics board game. This is a fully cooperative game where you're in the fictional city of, I shit you not, Megalopolis.
Right.
Which, that's a part of it was just like they're publishing the game and they're like, do we have time to change the name so it's not associated to a shitty Francis Ford Coppola movie? But anyway, so this is Megalopolis. It is split up into numerous. It's a beautiful, beautiful map. It is separated into numerous segments, and you play as a superhero. And your superhero has a stack of cards that are custom designed for you, and you have a certain hand. And at the end of your turn, you can draw additional cards. And then throughout your round, you get a certain number of turns, a certain number of actions, and you have a certain number of fixed actions you can use. And then some of the cards in your hands can either require an action or be used for free. So that's basically it. Moving is an action. Some people move faster than others because every single character is completely bespoke. The beginning of the game has a several number of villains. We on most of the game looks like it's going to be 2, and at a specific point in the game, they come out one by one, and when they come out, they start making life a living hell for your heroes. Your heroes, of course, this is a standard setup where you go and do things, and then the board gets worse. And that's how it scales with player count. So you have in a 2-player game, the enemies do things twice. In a 4-player game, the enemies do things 4 times. And in this situation, you're basically drawing a card which tells you to bring down thugs. Now, thugs are little tiny minis. They go on a board. And as I say this, you're going to start nodding your head going, this looks familiar. Where it tells you a sector, like sector 25. And why in the world are the numbering system not sequential? No, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. And so you're always scanning the map for number 24. Like, why isn't 24 next to 23? Why is it completely different on the board? Why do you make that a living hell? Why does it take 20 seconds So you find your location and you put 1 or 2 guys. If there are guys already there, you just add to it. If it gets more than 3, you get an explosion where you add additional guys to the outside. And if it gets worse and worse, once again, if you run out of guys from your supply, even big things happen. And on top of that, you have the big monster, the big main villain that will move across the board. On top of that, you have a storybook, and the storybook will tell you the game gets easier, but after a certain threshold, after you achieve a certain objective, there you have also personal objectives. The page turns, the game gets more difficult. Once you defeat the first boss, you flip the page over, and the game gets more difficult again. If that sounds like Pandemic, you would be 100% correct. It is Pandemic. You're moving your cube, or in this case, a really nice mini, from one area to another. You're then using an action in order to remove the cubes or thugs. And so that's mitigating, while at the same time trying to find the tools required to defeat the main villain, the main virus. Now, this game is modeled so much so that I find it fascinating, and maybe there's a connection, where people were comparing this more to Defenders of the Last Realm, or Defenders of the Realm, or Defenders of the Last Stand, rather than Pandemic. And I can see why. Because Defenders of the Last Realm and Defenders of the Last Stand, which are games I really dislike, the reason why is that they added more complexity and increased the randomness of Pandemic without making the game easier in any other capacity. So imagine playing Pandemic, and then every time you wanted to remove cubes, you had to roll the die. And Pandemic was smart enough to say, no, you have enough random number generators with the 2 decks. The game's hard enough. We don't need to add just another random element. Defenders of the Last Stand said, hold my beer. We're making everything a random chance, which means you can't spend a turn completely wasting your time because of bad rolls. And to the point that my friend lent me the game saying, you're going to love this. And he was sarcastic, and he was right. I hated the game. I played the game several times. My wife played the game several times, and she got so frustrated because the game was so difficult, because the random number generator kept on randomly making the game arbitrarily more difficult. So this is one of those games where you can commit no mistakes and still lose. And I don't really like games that do that, put a lot of arbitrary random elements as a way to increase difficulty without making the game fun. And so Freedom 5 does the same thing. If you want to remove guys from your board, you got to roll for it. But they do one thing better, the fact that they made you significantly more powerful. For example, I played a character named Bastion, I think, but he was basically the Iron Man analog. And then the other player played, I think, the Superman analog. So Superman analog was really good for leadership. They could move. So when they do a move action, they can move much further than me. But I had cards that allowed me, if I played a certain card with an action, it would wipe out all of the enemies in that sector. So I didn't have to roll. So that was something good. So the cards give you some way of mitigating. But I found that my personal opinion when I was playing the game was that Pandemic's been out for 15 years. Why are we still making virtual carbon copies of that formula? And I know someone's going to say, well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But I look at it and said, yeah, but there have been so many of these. Why in 2024 is somebody doing a reskinned, uppity version of Pandemic after all this time?
I mean,
And that was my thing.
Well, why do people keep making different games based on the same games? Because
I don't mind people taking a game mechanic and basing off of, but this seems to be almost, it is basically Pandemic with more stuff. And that's what basically it is. And we see the same thing with deck builders. We saw after Dominion came out, we saw games that were carbon copies of that. And that's fine. That happens. But now the new deck builders that come out try to do things significantly different. At least the ones that are good, like the Dune game was deck building, but it did a lot more. And for this game, does this take the Pandemic formula and add layers to it without changing the base model? I thought that was just like, if someone tells me, do you want to play a Pandemic game? I'm like, sure, let's play Freedom 5. I'm not interested. I mean, so that's the good thing. The praise is, the negative is it's another Pandemic clone.
Mm-hmm.
But the good thing is that it's a really good Pandemic clone. But you also have to understand that it is insanely difficult. It is more difficult than Pandemic. But there's a very weird thing that my friend and I stumbled on purely by accident. And that is the game gets harder when you turn a page. And you only turn a page when you achieve a certain objective. And the objective for most of these games is complete. Both of you have to complete your personal objectives. And once that happens, you turn the page. And if one villain hasn't appeared in the table, you put one villain on the table. Sure. Okay. Whatever. But if you don't pursue, both of you don't both go complete your own objectives, and you go about trying to defeat the main villains, you never turn that page. And so the ramping up of the difficulty never happens. So in a strange situation, which apparently does not happen very often, we were able to start clearing the map. And at a certain point, one of the villains came down. My character is apparently very good at alpha striking a main villain. Mm-hmm. So I was able to pool my cards. And the whole idea, you're supposed to knock this villain down. He's supposed to run, and you're supposed to chase him down and take him out. I, however, through a very good selection of cards, was able to completely kill off this villain in one round the moment I got into the same space with them. And at that point, my other friend still hadn't completed his personal objective. And when he did, by that point, the second villain popped up. So I moved to him and repeated the same process of blowing all of the cards in my hand to create a very powerful system. And this guy had like 9 hit points, and I did like 12 damage, which is very difficult, but I was able to do it. And we defeated him on the same turn where my friend completed his personal objective. So we won the game. But then we flipped over the page and we saw how much harder the game would get. But because we had defeated the 2 villains on the first page, the game never got more difficult. So the game felt really easy for us because we gamed the game. We realized that the game would get increasingly more difficult the moment somebody completed their personal objective. So we just didn't complete our personal objectives until we were close to winning the game. As a result, the game never got more difficult. So I found that to be a very interesting, and I'm pretty sure that they didn't want that. They wanted you to complete your personal objective and then go after the main villain. And so so you would turn the page, the game would get more and more difficult, and then you would get frustrated, but maybe scrape out a very short victory. But the fact that I didn't do that, the fact that we beat the 2 villains on the first page of this 3-act structure, ended up breaking the difficulty tangent of the game. So the game became more fun because we were able to win it, and we never got the frustrating grind that the game wanted us to suffer from. Mm-hmm. So my result is I get about a 7.5, only because I have a funny feeling that if we played the game as the designers wanted us to play it, it would have been a much more frustrating, difficult experience. And I don't think that's a smart play if it's the first time playing a multi-act game. The reviews have been really, really good. It's getting an 8. It's got an 8.0. But most people have said it is, with the criticism being it's an extremely difficult game. I thought it was really, really good. If you have multiple Pandemics and you love them, then know that going into Freedom 5, it is basically another Pandemic clone. But just go faster stripes. It's got minis. It looks really, really good. It's got a superhero theme. If you like that, you like Pandemic. If you hate Pandemic, maybe give Freedom 5 a pass.
That is fair enough. I mean, it's a shame on one hand. I don't like when games that are story based are so hard that you cannot really advance the story easily enough. I think they should always have some sort of way to play it in story mode if you wanted to. So you can keep playing without it being so difficult, because all you're interested in is the story. But then that's my take on story-driven games. So there you go. But okay, so you liked it. You are happy you have it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good. Well, in that case, I have nothing else to say because I haven't played it or even seen it. And it's nothing like Flames of Freedom, which is the game that they released in 2014, and is the game that I have played. And I did enjoy that game an awful lot because it really felt like playing a group of superheroes and how their powers were related to each other and they could be complementary to each other. And that was a great game. So I missed that one. Still have it, but I haven't played it for years and years and years. So anyway, I have nothing else for now. So I think on the 1 hour and 1 minute, we can say our goodbyes.
Yeah, next week, I'm going to try to see about snagging, getting back on our guest listing and getting the people that we really talked about. But I want to reach out to Jamie and we want to see about pitching more ideas. And then next week, I definitely do want to do a follow-up from the Ben Riggs post talking about the inherent racism that populated and plagued D&D in its early years that a lot of people are trying to apologize for, and it's best to confront them head on.
Fair enough to me. I am up for that. Humans, thank you very much indeed for being with us tonight. It is honestly and truly very, very much appreciated. You can still get hold of me on pretty much any social network. I am more active nowadays on Blue Sky, even though I'm still keeping my Facebook account because I have too many friends I love dearly in that platform. And I will do my best to make it a better place however I possibly can. So follow us in both of those. I'm still on TikTok and blah, blah, blah. All the links are in the show notes. So please do take a look and let me know. And email on podcast@gmsmagazine.com.
This is Chris Diaz. I'm no longer on Twitter, but I have Blue Sky or Deus Ex Machina. Deus Ex Machina on Facebook, Deus Ex Machina on TikTok. Since I'm Canadian, I didn't suffer from the whopping 4 hours of downtime when TikTok got banned in the US. And for those people who are curious, please ignore the conspiracy theories that claim that Meta has secretly bought TikTok. They have not. It is impossible. You can't do that with without an FCC filing, which is public knowledge. But in an effort to fight against the corporations that were trying to push for a TikTok ban, do what a lot of people have been doing. Both Instagram and Facebook have just started their TikTok accounts. A lot of people have been saying it's now their banned thing. Go to Facebook, go to Instagram, on TikTok, and block them, which has been the big push now. Block Facebook. Not that it matters; they don't really care, but it's something you can do to make yourself feel better. But anyway, I am on TikTok. I don't do as much stuff on the TikTok with the role-playing games as I do with the cracker making, because I got my dough sheeter this week. My dough sheeter is a machine that goes back and forth and rolls my crackers flat. And I also got my nitrogen band sealer. So now my bags can go through and they get sealed instantly rather than me having to spend 10 seconds manually sealing each bag. And then it also injects nitrogen into the bag to preserve them. So my cracker empire is slowly building.
Fancy. Well, I hope it does very well indeed. So you can send me a big box every single year for Christmas.
Will do.